Okay, so this is PPM number 52, still in chapter 4 from Being and Learning, which is Plato's Allegory of the Cave is the title of the chapter. There's quite a ways to go in this chapter, or as it turned out, after the material that I wrote 10 years ago was published. This is pages, and we're going to be reading from pages 84 and 85 in Being and Learning. So yesterday, I've talked about these quotations that both excerpts as well as terms, as well as sort of key sentences, excerpts that I've sort of borrowed along the way, and that have also constructed. So it's a combination of excerpted material as well as material that I've produced. And early on in the writing, in the beginning of the project, a lot of it was working out my own sort of key categories and key phrases. Really, I would say more than categories, it would be phrases. And so I was working that out. I talked about compression, which had to do with the repetition of a lot of phrases and working with a lot of terminology in order to get to some sort of key terms. In terms of excerpts and quotations, I've talked about how I've had some that I've identified, and then I've sort of dropped them into the discussion. I've likened it, the discussion when it's getting underway every day to a pond that is still. So once again, recapping, this was an experiment that took place 10 years ago. I'm commemorating it this year by going back and reading each of the meditations that I wrote. And I would write for at least an hour, and probably we would an hour and a half every day, and it was very challenging. It's as challenging to read it every day and to find the time to do it, to sit down and actually clear my mind, and then to sit down and sort of pick up where I'd left off the day before and get into it was a big challenge. But I likened the experience, and I've already cited Hannah Arendt's use of the metaphor of Penelope weaving. That thinking is like Penelope weaving all day, and then in the evening unweaving what she's weaved. One has to start again fresh. And so this notion that I would start every day, the pond of thinking would be very still, and I would drop in a stone, and then follow the ripples, right? So one of the stones that I keep coming back to, the sort of initial one that is from the excerpted material, was from Plato's Allegory, and it's from Plato's Allegory, Republic, 5:18. It's the material that comes right after the telling of the tale, and that's how we ended yesterday. That's how I ended yesterday's meditation, and it's really the key excerpt, I would say, that motivates the entire project. We must conclude that education is not what is said by some who profess to put knowledge into a soul which does not possess it, as if they were putting sight into blind eyes. On the contrary, our account signifies that the soul of every man does possess the power of learning the truth and the organ to see with it. Hence, there may well be an art whose aim would be to effect this very thing, the conversion of the soul, which already has the power, and to ensure that instead of looking in the wrong direction, it is turned in the way it ought to be. So this notion that we have this capacity within us to perceive, to think, and so that the goal of education is this art of turning, right? So it's the art of turning. And so what I've been doing with this writing is sort of trying to experiment with this art of turning, and I called it in my commentary a sort of autodidactia, self-turning, if you will. So picking it up then, after that excerpt, that's where we are, and the writing that happened on the 5th of April, 2004. As we read in this most important of passages, indeed the very passage that put this project underway, every one of the prisoners, that is, every one of us who is yet to undertake the purposeful wandering of learning, is capable of being turned around. The allegory is properly read as the emergence of the sage. But now we must identify the sage differently from the form we have inherited from that tradition. Our inheritance offers us a depiction of the sage as akin to Plato's ruler, as the benign philosopher monarch who leads us along, yet is always one step ahead, as it were. With this inherited view, the sage appears to us as above and beyond. in some respects, retaining a special view of things. This depiction is in some respects inverted by Heidegger's teacher, who lets learning happen because she, like Socrates, is less sure of her ground than the students are of theirs. So if we think of the sage in these terms, then yes, in some way she represents a particular person with a unique standpoint in the world, as well as the unique capacity to draw others into the relationship with her in that close proximity to her standpoint, where they can together be in the region where she wanders and dwells as a teacher. When we say unique standpoint, we must be very careful not to blindly embrace our inheritance. The uniqueness of her location is not hers as teacher, but one she inhabits and finds herself located in. To say unique in this way is to intend original, but original as originary, fundamental, or essential. The teacher is located in the originary standpoint of learning, the unstable ground, and it is from this ground that she acquires a new way of seeing, speaking, and hearing, that is, a new way of being in the world. This way of being in the world enables her to address others as apprentices, as potential companions, and it is precisely this way of addressing that we have called evocative speaking, that addresses the capacity, Plato says, we all have to hear the call of learning. But this suggests the teacher, insofar as she arrives from the location of learning, addresses the potential apprentices with sage, not as the sage. Sage, understood in this way, is a way of seeing, speaking, and hearing, that we might call the original or essential way of learning. Learning as purposeful wandering is thus a kind of language, a form of communication not unlike the distinct dialects of a region or a neighborhood. We often hear folks speak with an accent, a particular flavor, or to use familiar words in unfamiliar ways, and we immediately recognize the presence of a dialect. Evocative speech is something akin to the dialect of learning, which suggests it is a form we could acquire and use as one way of comporting ourselves. But this last point begs to be unpacked, because it seems all too easy for one to feign the accent. Or is it? Perhaps it would appear obvious if one were like an actor merely putting on the sage accent. We'll return to take up this point in a moment when we reflect on the position of those actors who staged the theater of oppression and the manipulation in the cave. For now, we emphasize the egalitarian reading of Plato's comment on the allegory, especially his insistence that education is not the act of depositing into an empty vessel, but the process of addressing the capacity to receive, the openness to the other that is already within everyone. The power of learning that we all possess is the power to receive. We possess the capacity to receive, but this capacity can only be actualized when and if it is given as an offering. The offering is the calling that turns us around and draws us out, releases us into the open region. But if this is the case, that we all have the capacity to receive, then it seems we all have the capacity to recognize the call of learning and respond to the voice of the one who speaks from the location of the sage. And if this is what Plato meant when he says that we all, quote, possess the power of learning, the truth, and the organ to see it with, then the truth here can be understood as the learning, and the organ as our capacity to receive, respond, and be turned around. And this is why Heidegger says that the allegory offers us a tale about the essence of the truth as the essence of education. Truth is learning. And that's how it ends. I wrote in my parenthetical notes that I supposed I would put, when I edited this, that I would write truth is learning and then in parentheses understood as a process. But I did not change that. So in the book it ends truth is learning, just like that. So just to back up then, to say truth is learning, I'm saying that truth is can be understood as the learning, or the way that we learn, our capacity to receive, respond, and be turned around. So then, clearly, I'm just underlining that truth here is the modality of learning. It's the truth of that modality, or perhaps the reality of that modality, and the modality of that place, the reality of the sage. So here truth then is taking on a sort of factual, or there's the facticity of the truth, which is a real shift from the speculative philosophical place perhaps that I have been moving in. Right. So then, and I think this is in one way just to be sort of straight up with Plato when he says that we have this capacity. It's not a speculative thing. It's not, this is not the realm of metaphysics and the realm of speculating on a domain of ideas or the ideas. This is a claim about what makes us human. It's really a crypto form of what Kant calls the faculties. I mean, it's just something that's inherent to human beings. In the day and age that we live in today, all of this is sort of being reduced to cognition, and then reduced to the workings of the brain. So, the receptive, what I'm calling the receptive modality, the capacity to receive evocative saying to be turned around, today would be likened probably to some part of our brain. Whatever the case may be, I mean, I'm not going to take up arguments with neuroscience. My point is that in the way that neuroscience today claims that our brains have certain capacities and that they can sort of pinpoint this part of the brain as being, for example, the part of the brain that enables us to be empathetic. I'm not sure that they have found that, but whatever the case, for Plato, when he's talking about this capacity, and even in the translation is organ, he's talking about it as some actual capacity of the human being, and it's this sort of factual sense of our capacity, the reality of that capacity that then becomes a much stronger claim than talking in these more poetic ways. So in this sense, I think the claim is being made that truth is learning, which is to say that there's a particular capacity and there's a particular reality to that capacity, and there's a particular modality, and there's a particular and this modality has a reality to it, and it's out of the sort of realism, if you will, that one is claiming that there's this truth of learning, right? So, but that is a particularly sort of interesting kind of claim, especially because in the past I've talked about the essence of learning in alternative ways. To talk about, let's see if I can find the quotation. I think it was from chapter 3. Let's see. Well, here's one. The sage is the one as teacher whose evocative saying turns around and releases the apprentice to learning. So to say that truth is learning, the truth then is this. Yeah, here we go. This is the one. The essence of learning is freedom. So that's on page 63, and that's from chapter 3, The Way of Lao Tzu. The essence of learning is freedom, and then here on page 85 in Being and Learning, truth is learning. So if the essence of learning is freedom, and truth is learning, then the essence of truth is freedom. So that's the claim. That's the new sort of clarification in a very succinct form. The essence of truth is freedom, because now truth is defined as learning. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to be very succinct today.